Okay, ladies and gentlemen, just before we start, I'd just like to let you know that there is a questions and answers box at the bottom in the toolbar, and you can send your questions through that to all of our panelists. We'll take the questions after everybody's done talking. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Browning Rockwell. Please, Browning, if you may unmute yourself and go ahead.
Good afternoon or good morning, as Belen said. First, I'd like to thank Belen and her team at ATA Insights for helping to organize this unwieldy group of people today. We've had over 600 plus people register. I hope we have a good number have showed up, but also want to thank Solar Expo for sponsoring this event. It's part of the World Future Energy Summit. It's a distinct event coming up in January of 2018. As you know, this is organized by the Saudi Arabian Solar Industry Association and a new association we formed recently after the REPTO conference in April called the Saudi Arabian Wind Industry Association. Sort of in parallel, we felt that there were many commonalities there, and it was important that we give representation in the wind area. So this event we'll be discussing both areas in terms of localization. But as you know, the title is How to Leverage the Saudi Arabian Renewable Energy Local Supply Chain Opportunity. We have four distinguished gentlemen today who are going to join us from all parts of the world. We have Chris Anfeld from South Africa. He's down in beautiful Cape Town. Chris has a background, he's American, but has spent the past 6 years in South Africa, living there, but also working extensively in the renewable energy field in both the wind and solar. And he'll be speaking to us about some lessons learned in the South African market. Ayman Guerrero, who has spent a lot of time in and out of Saudi Arabia. He's with Altran. He's going to speak to us a little bit about some of the work he did prior to the REPTO formation in the early years, working under Royal Commission and various other groups in Saudi, looking at the whole localization issue and sort of the first phases of the renewable energy program when it was launched and didn't move forward very actively. And then we have Mehdi Boughazata from Aqua Power. Aqua Power is a key player in the region, a Saudi company that has been very active in Morocco, Jordan, Egypt, and most recently they were the low bidder on the CSP project in Dubai the past couple of days. So congratulations to them on that. They've got a lot of experience with localization issues. And Christophe Jeffricher from ENGIE. ENGIE is a very large French energy company, very diversified, has a worldwide experience, and obviously has a great deal to say about the localization and their roadmap to localization, and they both in wind and solar. Just for a second, I'd like to tell you a little about SASIA and SAWIA and our mission statement. I know this is somewhat of maybe a boring slide, but it's important to highlight that this mission statement and SASIA started in 2011 with the first phase and introduction of the renewable energy program in Saudi Arabia. I think people anxiously awaited for several years for the program to really kick in, and we've seen that now with REPTO, the reorganization of the Ministry of Energy in Saudi, and we see a very, very succinct and direct program being established now. So, you know, our mission is to expand the use of solar and wind energy technologies at the regional level while fostering the growth of renewable energy supply chain in the KSA. The key thing here is localization. You know, Saudi Arabia's initiative here is not just about creating renewable energy. It's about creating jobs, building technologies, bringing the world to Saudi Arabia and introducing Saudi Arabia and the capabilities of Saudi Arabia. And a part of this meeting is to begin to have that conversation, to introduce you to a market that may be new, may be old to others, but it's a totally new field with a lot of interesting opportunities and a lot of amazing companies that have grown up over the last 30 plus years as Saudi has built their country. And there's some very interesting capabilities there that we want to highlight and get people together. So as I said, we want to create jobs for nationals and opportunities for local B2B sourcing. Because as we see, there's two areas of development here that are taking place. What we see in round one is sort of a top-down, tender-based, winner-take-all. Concurrently, we see some initiatives developing with the ECRA, the regulatory agency, now coming out with a policy for their distributed generation, which will open up opportunities for real value chain, supply chain to be developed. So we also provide high-level networking opportunities through workshops, conferences, and publications, much like this. We run about 5 or 6 events annually. This is first in a series of webinars we will do. We have a couple more coming up, which you'll hear about, follow up to this. We also have a roadshow we're going to do in August, which will be a follow-on to this in 3 cities in Hobart, Riyadh, and Jeddah, which will be a B2B networking event. And then in November, we have a large conference and exhibition scheduled to bring a sort of global trade mission conference. All of this will be done online, offline, but very actively. We want to also assist policymakers with developing renewable energy policy. We are a forum to aggregate comments from the industry and put them forward to the policymakers so they understand the needs and the experience of the private sector. We want to support international companies in getting established and connected in Saudi, providing that networking and matchmaking opportunity to allow companies to bring technology, expertise in the market and cooperate with local companies. And we also want to advance the development of solar and wind technologies, product standards, and certifications through technical and academic cooperation with organizations worldwide, which is a very critical thing and something that's important to the long-term strategy of Saudi Arabia. So going on from there, this webinar really was an offshoot of the conference I attended, the Saudi Arabia Renewable Energy Investment Forum on April 17th and 18th in Riyadh, where the first round tender was formally announced, and really the REPTO organization and under the management of Turki Al-Shari were sort of really brought out into the public. And in that conversation, they had a workshop on the second day where they talked about the REPTO localization roadmap. They didn't use that word exactly, but there were three pillars to that. There was local content through tendering, and this is something that the group today will talk a little bit about, the Saudization compliance metric. This is a formula that's basically based on trying to incentivize local content. And many of the first round bidders are grappling with this and trying to figure out how they will comply and get the best possible score. The other area is creating business opportunities that the government is encouraging through governments. That's really trying to create the right type of organizational structure in the government so people understand who to talk to, who the key players will be, and to work with the private sector in trying to establish policies and regulations. And then SAGIA, the Saudi Arabian Investment Authority, has really streamlined a number of their programs for investment in Saudi, which will encourage foreign direct investment and companies to come in and set up manufacturing or business services in Saudi Arabia. And the final is encouraging private sector investment. And this is really about a B2B marketplace. In the past, we've sort of had this top-down, tender-based business. Really, I think the renewable energy market in Saudi will grow from within the industry. So this type of conference and networking events that we will have and conferences will be key to the growth and development. This slide is courtesy of GTM Research, which was one of our media sponsors on this event. GTM is a global research organization, but they're tracking the PV industry around the world. I don't mean to isolate PV because we're certainly addressing solar wind today as well. But it's just showing you this trend that's increasing. When you look at the MENAT region, the Middle East, North Africa, Turkey, we're going from a relatively small market, 1.5 gigawatts up to over 11 plus in a very short period of time. But we're seeing this radical growth. So in terms of global opportunity, this region is becoming a significant player, and I think that's why a lot of you are here today to see this. These are numbers I think you're seeing quite often in the marketplace. Again, when you break that out, you'll see that Saudi Arabia in the gray area is a key player. We have a compounded growth rate that's going to be substantial over the next years. So I think this is a market that's open for business. We're here today to talk about that. With that, I'd like to just kind of move on to our first speaker. And get the first speaker, we will have Chris Arnfelt. But to introduce him, I want to give us a brief overview of the National Renewable Energy Program, which targets 9.5 gigawatts by 2023, with an interim target of 3.45 by 2020. So this is all part of the National Transformation Plan in Saudi Arabia. Chris brings to us a background experience of having watched what happened in several years in advance of Saudi, the launch of a renewable energy program, both wind and solar, in South Africa. And I reached out to him because I felt this would be a good kind of template to look at what were the lessons learned, what worked and what didn't work in in South Africa. But before that, I think we want to have a quick polling question that Belen is going to go through, so we kind of get a sense of what the audience is thinking about. We're going to have 2 questions that we'll ask throughout the event here. So I'll let Belen take that, and then we'll move on to Chris.
Okay, yes, we do have a question for you guys. This is a question so that we understand who is present there. So it's a very simple question. I would ask you to please use your own mouse and start voting. The question is, in what role are you looking to participate of the KSA opportunity? And the answers are very simple, whether you're a developer, an equipment manufacturer, an EPC, an offtaker, potentially, consultant, a financier, or you're just observing the market. So if you could please just take your pick. We understand that possibly you have a role in a different market and you have a different role here. But I would like you to do is just in terms of what you're expecting to do in Saudi, what does it look like? So I'm just going to give you an extra 10 seconds to answer. Reminder, the question is, in what role are you looking to participate of the KSA opportunity? And the options are developer, equipment manufacturer, EPC, offtaker, consultant, financier, or just as an observer. And I'll allow you 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And Araceli, can you please show the results? So here is what it's looking like. Browning, I really would like you to perhaps give your opinion on this. It looks like most of them are consultants. We have also some developers, equipment manufacturers. It's through the board, that's quite clear. And we have quite a lot of observers as well. Perhaps that gives you a better idea of who's there.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting mix. I think it's sort of early in the event. We have about approximately 200 participants right now on the event. So this, it's kind of a balanced situation. I'm not surprised that consultants are a large number here. I mean, consultants are obviously looking at ways of either doing business for themselves or helping other companies do business. So that's kind of a healthy number. They're always a multiplier for business opportunities. The even mix across the other areas is fairly interesting. Offtaker, which I expected, that's really not a major thing yet in Saudi Arabia, but I think it's it's a pretty good balance here of where obviously this is a market that's and a discussion that goes across many different topics. So I think it's a good balance.
Excellent. So we'll have the follow-up questions after other speeches.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chris. I guess I've got to move my new screen share for Chris. And Chris, if you could take over, and we'll let you talk about South Africa and give us a few words of wisdom of your experience there and where we might go in Saudi Arabia.
If you can just stop sharing, Brian, so that Chris can share, that'd be great. Excellent.
Great. Well, thanks for inviting me to speak. Let me see if I can share my screen now. Can you see it okay? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, as Brownie mentioned.
For us, please, just make the presentation larger so that we can see it better, but we can see it fine.
Okay, there we go. Cool. As Brownie mentioned, I'm based in South Africa and have been working here for the last 6 years and have done a lot of work in the localization road mapping for the solar and wind industry here, which I'll be speaking to in this presentation. Here's a brief outline of what I'll be discussing. I'll start off with an overview of South Africa's Renewable Energy Procurement Program, also known as the REI4P. I'll try to highlight some achievements and challenges in terms of local content that we saw in this program. And I'll wrap up with some lessons learned specifically for Saudi Arabia or other government procurement programs. So South Africa's procurement program got off to a good start. It began back in 2011. And they procured over 6 gigawatts from over 90 projects. A mix of sizes and resources and technologies were procured. Most of those, however, came from wind and solar projects, as you can see from the figure here. The first few rounds went pretty smoothly, a little bit delayed, but the projects were typically built on time and met their localization goals that were set. Round 3 is still under construction for a number of projects, and we've had a bit of a hiccup. The round 4 has been delayed now for over 2 years because the state-owned utility, Eskom in South Africa, has refused to sign the PPAs for those projects. It's not an entirely unexpected move by the state-owned utility because they aren't unbundled and they have an inherent conflict of interest to buy from their own generators before they sign PPAs with private companies. So it's a good reminder as the more IPPs are introduced in Saudi Arabia or other procurement programs in other markets, the market rules really need to be clear, and the access to the grid needs to be fair amongst the IPPs and stakeholders that are trying to be a part of that market. So despite the delays experienced in the REI-4P, there are a lot of positive achievements that went along with that. The biggest one being the drop in prices we saw from rounds 1 through 4. Solar came down 75% and wind came down 55%. And that was consistent with some international trends we saw in the technology prices dropping, but also representative of the consistent rollout that South Africa pursued with reducing risk by having multiple rounds and being consistent with following through with those rounds. Local content also increased for each of the rounds, except for towards the end of the wind projects, and that was mainly a result of the increasing cost of imports due to exchange rate fluctuations, which impacted the total value spent on imports versus local content. And lastly, it also created a number of jobs in construction and even more so in operation. So to further understand the localization impact, it's helpful to look more closely at an example project of where the money is spent. For the first few rounds, most of the local content thresholds could be met with local EPC alone. There were a few projects that also sourced some local equipment like transformers and wiring, and some crystalline silicon modules were also sourced locally. And those assembly plants basically import the cell, but then build the module around the cells to produce a tier 2 or 3 crystalline silicon module. There were some concerns, though, with those tier 2 and 3 modules raised by some financiers in terms of bankability for utility scale projects. These products hadn't been used in utility scale projects before this, so that limited their wider use for other projects. Also, round 3, there were some challenges experienced with one of the developers allegedly importing modules below cost through a local distributor who then added a markup onto those modules. This highlights the need to make sure these local content targets are enforceable, because in South Africa it was difficult to enforce some of the local content rules. The wind industry followed a similar trend in that most of the local content in the first few rounds could be procured through EPC. The first major component that was manufactured in South Africa was the turbine tower, then followed by the anchor cages and meteorological masts. So here are some sample companies that are active in South Africa's value chain for utility wind and solar projects here. It attracted a number of world-class companies from IPPs to developers to even manufacturers. In terms of finance, it was mainly local banks that provided the project finance, but many DFIs also participated, and corporate finance was leveraged for some projects as well. It was mixed results for a lot of the local suppliers and local equipment manufacturers in South Africa. Many of them felt the pinch from the delays, and some had to close their businesses because they didn't have enough demand to support their operations. And many also have had to scale back their employment numbers because we've been waiting now 2 years for round 4 to be signed. So lastly, just ending with some lessons learned from South Africa that can hopefully be applied in Saudi Arabia. Stable demand is one of the biggest drivers of a local industry. So that's stable demand from both government procurement, but also the private sector and local customers at the distributed generation level. Having a enabling market structure that allows fair access to the grid is really important, as we saw, as we're seeing in South Africa. Having enforceable local content rules, if those rules are going to be part of the procurement program, make sure they're clear and enforceable. Consider also procuring smaller scale projects, not just big utility scale projects. What we saw in South Africa with the smaller projects tend to be more of a level playing field for local companies that don't have a track record in the utility scale market. So it gives an opportunity for a different size company to participate. And lastly, when looking at localization goals for Saudi Arabia, consider incentivizing local components, maybe rather than just local spending, and make sure those local components can be manufactured at competitive prices, so they can also be exported after the government procurement program has reached its thresholds. So that's it for me. Thank you for the time, and I'll turn it back over to Belen.
Chris, can I speak for a second? Chris, just thank you very much. That was a great presentation. I think some good words of wisdom or takeaways from what happened in South Africa. I think that these are things that will apply very much so in Saudi Arabia. In terms of local content, can you just say one real quickly, whether was there a matchmaking activity, or how did the market grow? Was it kind of organically, or was it driven by external companies coming into the market and finding partners, or both ways?
It grew both organically, but also the thresholds for the procurement program in each round, they increased steadily. So there was a minimum threshold that each project had to meet, but also an upper target that they were trying to reach. So that was one of the big drivers for at least the utility localization.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, we're going to go on and talk. Ayman Garar from Altran. He's the Business Development Manager for Energy and Utilities. Ayman is going to tell us a little bit about what's going on and what has been happening in his work in Saudi Arabia and where he sees it going in the future. So I'll let him take it from here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Browning. First, I would like to thank you for the initiative. I think having this webinar in this time, it might be very helpful for all of the ecosystem. I also would like to thank Belen for her efforts and her team, of course. So thank you for the invitation. I would be very pleased to share, a few years of experience, especially in Saudi Arabia, regarding the renewable energy and also the renewable energy from early stage to nowadays. And I would like to share with you some of the outcome of some studies we have conducted for the renewable energy market in Saudi Arabia. So in order to give an idea about what are the opportunities for investors, developers, and as I see EPC and all the participants. So let me share with you quickly my presentation. So the way I will structure my presentation is I would start first talking about the Saudization compliance metrics formula, which is the basis of the local content requirement. Then I will try to analyze quickly the current offer, whether in terms of manpower provided by Saudi national capabilities, and also as a good and services. And at the end, I would try to share with you some recommendation and roadmap. So as it was communicated in the RFP, the Saudization local content metrics, it is a localized value divided by the total capex. When it comes to localized value, they divide it into goods and service on one side, and also salaries for Saudi national on the other side. And it's very simple for me. I was saying, okay, let's develop each one of those verticals. So first I will talk about the salaries for Saudi national, and I will try to explain there are many things to put it in place and implement in order to have salaries for Saudi national and to have Saudi nationals involved in renewable energy projects. So quickly, I try to understand the picture of people graduating from universities in Saudi Arabia. And this is just to give the potential of potential personnel to be deployed in renewable energy projects. And especially the freshly graduated people with whom you can train and you can anticipate in early stage. So there are 27 universities in Saudi Arabia. Those are only state universities. There are others, but I'm talking just about state universities. There are around 16,000 new graduated students in Saudi Arabia. Many of them are technical. There are also Saudi who went and studied abroad, around 4,600 person, and this is the number for technical disciplines. And when you go to a Saudi Council of Engineers, you will find like around 30,000 engineers of Saudi among 211,000 registered engineers in Saudi Arabia. So somehow there is a potential of people to be used for renewable energy, but also there is a requirement to start training coming generation for renewable energy projects. Then I will try also to explain the other vertical, which is the goods and services. So there are many services and goods that are provided currently in the local market. This is thanks to many factors. One of them is existing industrial activity, logistic facilities, including metalworks and glass factories. There are also some advanced manufacturing industry in Saudi Arabia, especially in two Royal Commission area, East and West. There are also plans to develop infrastructures, including ports and the new railways connection and highway development. So this will help later on to use the local ecosystem. One of the services that is already available on the market, as you can see, there are a lot of EPC companies in Saudi Arabia. It is true that they never worked, or maybe they did not work in renewable energy before, but they have the requirements to, to make a joint venture with international companies and get together and work together. There are also O&M services company who are capable, I do believe, capable, of course, to conduct the O&M scope. There are manufacturing system engineering services and electrical equipment assembly factory in Saudi Arabia. This is, I would like now to highlight what are the immediate offer in the market to be used within the renewable energy program. So you can see, like for EPC, there are companies who can do the engineering design. They are used to do civil work, mechanical installation, electrical installation. They are good in safety and quality. Of course, if they can do also the procurement once they are introduced to the big suppliers. So electrical equipment, everything is available in the market today. When you take a look on the electrical equipment supplies, also there are many equipments like power bus bars, circuit breakers, cables. Of course, this is already available in Saudi Arabia that could be brought directly by the developers and the EPC. And like O&M, for example, it's very simple. It's similar to what they used to do, but then they need to be trained. They need to be introduced to renewable energy, and this could be done thanks to collaboration with international companies who are looking into Saudi Arabia and who are going to, I mean, they might need a local partner, and then that's how they create alliance and joint ventures. As a recommendation for a future, I do believe that there are rooms for investment, and with the low capex, like getting with EPC together, trying to connect with O&M companies and system engineering service activities providers. This is somehow a relatively low capex investment. It will be a short payback within 5 to 8 years. High probability of successful transfer, technology transfer, which is one of the requirements of a renewable energy program. And also a higher probability of commercial success. And as per my experience, I have met a lot of suppliers and investors who are really now very interested, and they are just looking to get in touch with international companies and start talking and explore the common synergies. Of course, there are other opportunities in the future, especially with manufacturing, but this is somehow a longer payback period between 7 to 9 years. and it will be more useful for coming rounds. So as a recommendation, I would like to advise everybody who's interested in the Saudi market to start, like especially developers and EPC, to start talking to universities and try to explain what are the requirements on the ground, and try to set up plans for trainings and special maybe internships. Other thing, I would like to recommend people to get to talk to each other, especially to be introduced to the local ecosystem, like from the local side to try to get in touch with the international people, and the international to try to find out who can be one of the right supplier for them. Because I do believe there are many things to complete each other. There are gaps that could be fit with trainings, with investments, but there are at least a minimum that could be explored. Then one of the scenarios that could be happening, like alliances should be set up, joint ventures for EPC and O&Ms, and of course, if there are rooms for manufacturing, like acquisitions. Thank you very much. I hope I have covered the requirements.
Yes, Ayman, great job. I think that, Ayman is in a few slides given a very good overview of I guess the hidden human and technical capital that's sitting in Saudi Arabia ready to be developed. There is a wealth of, college graduates with masters and PhDs, undergraduates that can be tapped into, as well as a very significant industrial base. For those outside looking in, I recommend you come and see the country, participate, get involved in some of the events that we're hosting at SASIA and SAWIA. This is all about networking and connection. This is a market that's going to really be developed from the inside out. It's not a fly-in, fly-out market. It's one we're going to have to get involved in. But the good news is at its core, there is a tremendous wealth of capability there that just needs to be repurposed in very specific areas, and they need international expertise in some cases to help that develop. And it's networking events like this that will have that. So we have one more polling question that we're going to ask. Belen,
that's correct. So we're going to put that up. But can I ask you, Ayman, to also stop sharing your screen? And yes, you should see now, we've already launched it, so it should be about a few seconds until you see it. And this is our second poll, and that is, what is the biggest driver, in your opinion, for long-term local renewable energy industry? And there is a few options, and you can only select one. This has been programmed from before, and the first is incentives, subsidies. So the first option, whether you think that incentives and subsidies are what influences or is the biggest driver for renewable energy long term. If not, the second would be government programs and tenders. The third would be enable policy support. The fourth would be high fossil fuel prices. So in other words, the market working its magic. And the fifth would be other options that perhaps haven't really been included here, but you think that are important. So all you have to do is select one of those options and just send us your votes. I would allow an extra 5 seconds or so. I can see that people are voting very rapidly here, clearly have an opinion. And I'll count down, just get your votes in. Last votes, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Can we show, please, to everybody what we found? So, wow, nearly 50% rounding, believe that is government programs.
Well, my comment on that is, I mean, this is the new reality in Saudi Arabia, that there are going to be two worlds here. This government programs and tenders has been the traditional conduit, and while it's the first phase of the Saudi program is very much along that line with the Repto round 1 tenders and subsequent rounds, I personally believe there will be an equal or greater piece of business outside of government tenders once the policy framework and programs are put in place, whether it's an offtake, whether it's a net metering programs, perhaps the increase in fuel prices, the decrease in subsidies of diesel. There is a very significant off-grid market, which I'd call maybe the dark grid, but probably up neighborhood of 5 gigawatts of energy being produced by diesel generators that for 30 years have been subsidized by fuel prices. That is changing. That's going to change the model. So I think that's an initial reaction that Saudi has been a tender-driven market, and it's but it is, the problem is in those markets it's a winner-take-all market, and it also doesn't really create a ecosystem or value chain because it's not really sustainable when you have a more open market. So I think it's going to be a combination of the two. As I like to say, this is a marathon, not a sprint. While the first round everybody has jumped on, there's maybe 18 companies pre-qualified for that. It's kind of a limited universe. There's a much bigger and broader market that's evolving here. It's kind of going simultaneously with this. And there is an undercurrent of development, and it's going to take I would say a little bit of time. It'll move very quickly, but I think it's significant what Repto has done to get this first tender off the ground and to move forward and establish to the world that they're very serious. And I think the world is taking them serious. So with that, I'm going to move on.
One thing, sorry, Brownie, before we go on to the next, just to let everybody know, because I see a lot of questions coming in this direction. Yes, you will get the presentations. Yes, you will get recordings. They'll be sent to you in a couple of days. And the questions and answers that you're sending us, the questions, we will try and get to them once all of the speakers have spoken, okay? So we'll try and get to them, time allowing, but do keep sending them so that we know what you're thinking and we can react to that, okay? Thank you very much, Brownie. Sorry about that.
No, we will try and put together some post-webinar document that will address some of your questions and links to the recordings and so forth. And we will keep you posted on a continuing basis. Your feedback and these questions are going to help us to define future events, but also to give you information as we publish it and get it out into the public domain. So I'd like to move on to our next speaker, Mehdi Boukazata. Mehdi has been with Aqua Power. I think he said about 6 years now. He's seen a tremendous evolution in that company that has just kind of come in terms of the renewable energy space. Has been kind of one of the main champions in the region. They start out in Morocco. They've been in Jordan, in Egypt. Most recently, as I said, the CSP project and the PV projects in UAE. And now they're actively pursuing. They're one of the main bidders on the round one, and will be very active in the future business. So I think they can give us a lot of experience as a homegrown Saudi company. They're in the backyard there. They've grown up in it. They still are faced, I'm sure, with challenges of localization, because this is the first significant solar or renewable energy project they will have undertaken in their home country. So they're starting from ground zero a little bit like everyone else is, although they are born and raised there. So Mehdi, if you could go from here, we'll go.
Hi, good afternoon, Browning. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this initiatives and for also addressing this important topic, which is about the localization of the renewable project in Saudi Arabia. Yeah, as Aqua Power, I mean, this will be the first renewable project in, let's say, our home country, and we are very keen to explore the capabilities of the local market in terms of supporting the renewable energy program. And if you allow me, I can start presenting. I mean, what's the current requirement that has been fixed by Repto in order to evaluate the localization targets for each applicants in the SCACA solar PV upcoming tendering project. And also I would like also to share one of our, let's say, successful experience in Morocco. It's not a PV project, it's CSP, but in general I wanted to share with the audience the goals that we achieved in Morocco compared to what we expected in the beginning, what we successfully achieved at the end. And I think it will be a good example for the Saudi market, and what we have learned from Moroccan experience, we can I mean, discuss it through this Saudi experience.
Excellent.
Yeah. So as you may all be aware that now the round one has been issued by the Renewable Energy Project Development Office, which has been mandated in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to undertake the renewable energy program. The first round has already shown two projects under two different technologies. The first one is 300 megawatt solar PV in Skarka in Al Juf area, and now there is a wind project of capacity of 400 megawatt in Dumat Al Jandal, in almost let's say the same area as the solar PV project. The tendering process for the renewable project has already shown 300% of the overall capex as the minimum target that the offtaker or the client will be evaluating the applicants in terms of achieving the local supply or the localization target. For the wind project, the RFP is not yet released, but we are expecting the same, let's say almost the same mechanism, the same structure that has been already fixed for the solar PV project. The solar PV RFP has shown very clear requirement in terms of how the offtaker will be evaluating the applicants in terms of localization. The offtaker has specified two aspects for the localization. One related directly to the Saudi manpower or the salaries that will be directly paid to the Saudi nationals that will be whether employed by the EPC contractor or the project company during the construction phase. And the second layer of this localization is related directly to what can be manufactured locally as an equipment, services, and also logistics. What is interesting is RIPDO has provided a lot of, let's say, explanation and details in order for the applicants to make sure that they are, let's say, they are putting the right score or the right percentage for each category. And also, what is interesting in this process is the level of documentation and evidence that has been requested to all applicants in order to demonstrate and justify every single percentage of localization that will be guaranteed under the bid that will be submitted to RIPDO on 11 September. So this, for us as a developer, we are very, I mean, happy to see such level of detail, such level of clarity, and such level of, let's say, documentation that will be needed in order to justify this local content. Because we can understand through this process of localization that the client and the country in general is looking after a real localization concept. So it's not a general, or just a hope. It's the first step that the country is putting through this renewable project in order to try to delocalize the renewable industry in general, or as much as the country can delocalize the local manufacturing here in Saudi Arabia. In terms of employment during the operation phase, it's more or less very flexible. We have seen, I mean, in our previous project that this level of employment, 25% from PCOD, after it raised to 50% 10 years after PCOD, to 75, 15 years post PCOD. It's something that it's easy to achieve through our, let's say, past experience in the kingdom. I would like now to highlight some figures and some achievement that we successfully achieved in the Noor 2 CSP project in Morocco. The Noor 2 localization percentage that we achieved in Morocco is 32%, while I mean the minimum target was fixed, I mean internally as 30%. I mean the level of spending and the job creation directly and indirectly in Morocco goes beyond 1,800 workers, and the local portion that we successfully achieved for, let's say, special or a key part of the solar reflector is a torque tube, where we achieved a rate of 80% of local manufacturing in terms of engineering, and also still sourcing from Morocco. In terms of operation maintenance, we achieved in terms of operation maintenance employment, we achieved a score of 95% local skilled Moroccan employees that are actually operating the facility. I mean, the main, as Ayman showed in his slides, we almost identify in Morocco the same, let's say, the same activities that we localized in Morocco. We are expecting to see almost the same, let's say, activities to be easily, I mean, and more easily achieved in Saudi Arabia, because the market in Saudi Arabia is much more developed. There is a lot of capabilities. There is a lot of players that can support this industry, and we are confident that through a fair monitoring and interaction, joint work with these local companies, we can achieve this target. Our conclusion is based on the precedent experience. I mean, the market capability is there. The market is very keen to support the Kingdom renewable program. There is plenty of local companies that want to support this program and the industry in general. However, I mean, we need to work with them. We need to educate them on the level of, let's say, on the specific procurement process for this renewable project. We need to work with them to increase their, let's say, level of capabilities in order to support this program. The first round or the first project will be very, very interesting starting point for all these players in order to project themselves for the second round. And from what we heard right now, we are still in discussion with a lot of local companies, and we are getting very good and positive sign, and we hope that these capabilities will increase in the upcoming rounds. And thank you so much.
Okay, Mehdi, thank you very much. That's again a very interesting perspective from a homegrown company. I think there's again a lot to be said here, but one of the things I think is important to remember, while much of this is being focused on the REPTO tenders, there is I think as I said, equally large or greater market that will address localization issues. That I think is the market that's going to be growing out through the distributed generation market and other markets. So one of the things that's important through the tendering process, we kind of established a very high baseline of qualifications and standards that are the types of companies that will be vetted, and technologies brought in, and maybe training and education is going to go on. We're really set a good example for the industry as a total. So I think it's a very wise move, but we have to recognize that the market is going to be more than just a tender-based business. It's going to be like many markets around the world that are basically private sector driven. The REPTO office, while they're managing these tenders, they're also their program development office and management office. So they are not going to only be the only person providing the business opportunities. So it's a great start, but I think when we look at localization, we have to look at the overall plan as the market grows. Many of the companies that get experience through these initial tenders, local companies, and the network is going on, is going to be very important to the future of business in the country. So I'd like to move on to our last speaker, last but not least, that's Christopher Devonshire. He's with ENGIE. ENGIE, as you know, is a global energy company, very diversified, large company with operations all over the world. He will bring another perspective from a company that is going into markets all over the world and can address, what they've done in other markets and what they're going to do in Saudi Arabia.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So, as you said, I'll be giving you the perspective of an international sponsor. So let me share my screen with the audience. Okay, good. So briefly, as a quick reminder, people have to realize, and it's been said, it's really a huge opportunity for the whole private sector because the amount of tenders that will come out in the next few years is really a very rich pipeline, 9.5 gigawatts by 2023, 1 gigawatt of wind, 2 of solar PV by 2020. So this is really attracting a lot of players, local and international players. Now, before going into the subject, I wanted to take a step back and basically show you how different this program is, the REBDO program is, compared to the previous tenders we saw in the conventional space. So basically, and I won't go into too much detail, but first of all, the Offtaker is different. Previously, it was tendered by Saudi Aramco or SAC, and typically they were taking a 50 to 60% stake of the equity. Today, the Offtaker will be the Saudi power procurement company, and they won't be taking any equity stake. So it's fully up to the developer market to invest in these projects. Another big difference is that previously there was no sovereign guarantee. Now, because the Offtaker is no longer SAC, we will benefit from a guarantee from SAC. And then, as you know, SAC will be privatized normally going forward. So after that, we may have a government guarantee under certain conditions. Obviously, okay, the PPA is 20 to 25 year based, dependent on solar, on wind, and revenues are driven no longer by availability, but really by the energy that is being produced. But the real big difference is that previously there was no local content requirement at all, whereas now the rules have been established both during the construction periods and the operational periods. So this is really new for everybody in the market. And in general, okay, the new project documents are clearly bankable. REBDO did a very good work together with its advisors. So if we dig a bit deeper, and this is an example for solar, but the same can be said for wind. If you look really at the risks that we face as sponsors, REBDO has done a great job at mitigating those. As I said, the documents are bankable. They've selected good sites. They've done a good environmental and social impact assessment. They've done soiling studies. They provided the raw data from on-site measurements. So the nut to crack on this one is the local content requirement. And so if we go into the subject, obviously we have to recognize that it's a good initiative. Purpose is to develop the local economy. But going back and drilling a bit deeper, the objective for sponsors is to have 30% of the local, of the capex should be local. But if you drill deeper, 20% is actually mandatory. And for the other 10%, there is a penalty. So there is a $1 million penalty per percentage shortfall. So really, for the first 20%, everybody will definitely comply. For the other 10%, everybody will do his economic analysis. Is it better to source locally, or is it better to source internationally and assume a penalty, whichever is most economical? Another important element is that this is a new scheme for everybody. And I think this is a very good initiative because there has been some asymmetry of information in the market. The developers have received the RFP and the details on the localization requirements. And at the beginning, there was some frustration in the market, especially with local suppliers, because they heard about these rules, but they didn't know actually how it was being calculated, how it would be assessed. And so this initiative is very good at sharing that knowledge throughout the market. There have been a lot of localization initiatives in the past. We can think about the NITICAT system. Also, when we did projects for Saudi Aramco, they had certain rules on localization. And on this one, REPDO has issued very clear rules. It has given some examples, but obviously as we start working and when we start thinking of examples, there are certain gray zones that we're in the process of clarifying with REPDO. Now, obviously, these tenders, these renewable tenders, are very competitive. Browning, just to put things into perspective, you said there are only 27 companies that are pre-qualified. That can lead to a possibility of 18 consortium. If we look at previously the traditional CCGT tenders, you would have 5 to 6 pre-qualified companies. So for us, we see this as actually much more competitive even than a CCGT tender. That's one. But so in general, we've seen the prices go down on renewables. So this is very, very competitive, and we see a lot of value in partnerships at all levels of the value chain. Obviously, for sponsors that are not local, there is value in partnering up with local partners, but also for local suppliers, manufacturers, there's a lot of value in actually entering into partnership with foreign manufacturers who potentially can enter into a license agreement and have a technology transfer, which allows to manufacture locally, but also helps them in reducing the cost and ensure that local supply becomes really competitive compared to global supply. And this is a really important step because whatever is said here is valid for the first round, but we actually know already that in future rounds, the localization requirements will go up. So if they want to continue to source energy at ever low prices, it's really important that the local economy develops, partners up with foreign companies at all levels of the value chain so that we can ensure that prices continue to go down. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Christophe, thank you for that presentation. Again, it's very good to have an international perspective and a large company like NG participate in this. But again, I commend REPDO for going through this tendering process, because the information that is coming out of this and the work that's being done to really kind of define the market and connect all these different opportunities is very, very interesting. I think it's really going to help to jumpstart an overall renewable energy program in a very successful manner. So I think that Belen, should I pass it over to you and let you take it through? We'll have a few questions, perhaps.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much, Christophe, for stop sharing your screen. We have a lot of questions here. Some of them have already been answered by text. Some of them have already. But I see, first of all, that some people would like to answer some live. So let's start with Ayman. You've got a question here that you've said that you'd like to answer live regarding the database website for EPC companies where they're listed. Mehdi, you have to unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, sorry. So one of the audience has been asking the question how to meet with EPC and O&M companies. And this is first, I do believe that the Browning and SASIA as an association can introduce interested people to local actors, but I also can share some of the contacts, because we're talking to the whole ecosystem, and I can share some of the contacts for people who are interested.
Just to speak to that, on top of what he said, is that we will have some ongoing events. In September, I said we're going to have a B2B matchmaking event, which will be going to 3 cities in Saudi Arabia, which is specifically geared towards getting Saudi companies together with other Saudi companies and potentially international companies who want to participate in this sort of localization discovery process. It's you should call it a speed dating process, in a sense, for companies to get together and find out about what their specific opportunities are for how they could collaborate and work in the marketplace. But that we'll keep you posted. Since you've registered for this event, you'll certainly hear about it through our online publications and further emails to you.
Yeah, there's been a lot of questions about that. So clearly there is interest. So, we will be in touch with you and get in touch if you have any questions, but there's definitely going to be opportunities to meet people. Christophe, you marked that you'd like to answer one of the questions. You said, how will the percentage of local content be computed?
Yes, so basically I already answered that by text, but so basically there is a 1 million penalty per percentage shortfall. So basically there will be audits. So as Mehdi has shared in the presentation, we will have to regularly share information on where we stand in terms of local sourcing, share invoices, etc. And at the end of the construction period, there will be an audit, which will really calculate what the local content percentage we achieved. And okay, did we achieve 30% or more? That's fine. Are we between 20 and 30%? Let's say we reach 26%, then we would have to pay a $4 million penalty because we're 4% short. If we reach below 20%, then we have to pay $10 million of penalty. And on top of that, we can no longer participate to REPDO tenders for a few years.
Okay, thank you very much. Mehdi, there is another one for you here. It says, can you disclose how ACWA intends to achieve the 30% local content? You said you'd like to answer it live, and I want to hear it. I think we all do. So what are you thinking there?
Yeah, I wanted to ask this question live because I will disclose how ACWA Power intends to achieve the 30%. Right now, I mean, we are still at the early stage of the development process of this project. ACWA Power intends to achieve this 30% by looking to every single area surrounding, let's say, the EPC in terms of manufacturing, civil works, services, employment, plus the employment level that the future project company has to, or the level of employment that the future project company will be, let's say, able to employ, and accordingly the score behind this employment. So right now there is no specific formula. There is just a global assessment on all the aspects that can bring, let's say, or that can support this localization percentage. It's not about only electrical or employment. It's about global, let's say, picture and activities around the EPC area. So this is my answer.
Okay, there is a lot of there's a question here really about the relationship between ECRA, KCARE, SEC, I guess REPCO as well, and also questions about capability building, universities, who's involved, who's training who. I guess Browning, this would be good for you. Like how is the system working and organizing itself?
I would say one of the, I think the key elements of the whole program was the kind of the reorganization and of these, I call it the super ministry under the Ministry of Energy and now Minerals and Mining and Industry, which has created this kind of a one-stop shop for the energy industry in Saudi Arabia. So all of these different entities, SEC, ECRA, Saudi Aramco, and the REPDO office are all in the Ministry of Energy. And underneath that, they've created this renewable energy project development office, REPDO, which is kind of the single door, single window into all of this. So in the past, you had this, you call it, I don't know, a triangle, or more, maybe more than that, of organizations all kind of stovepipe doing their own thing. Today, we have a consolidated activity where we have this one organization that's going to lead the way with a lot of others following. So through REPDO, and they bring together all these different entities on a monthly basis to discuss their renewable energy program and strategies. So they're all very involved at a high level, but there is a single kind of control on this, which is very, very, very important to the management going forward of this program. As far as the universities go, I think one of the things that's been acknowledged at I spoke at the event in the MENA New Energy event in Dubai in April, and we had a number of people there talking about the university system. And there's a collaboration that needs to start to take place, because there, again, it's been very much like on the government level. A lot of the universities have had individualized initiatives, a lot of similar programs and research. I think there's much more of a collaborative approach, and that's I think that's what some of this program is going to begin to do. So that's recognized. That's part of a long-term strategy in terms of building this industry in Saudi Arabia. So I think we see that as being acknowledged and recognized, and there will be plenty of opportunity that we are trying to engage as much as we can the academia in Saudi Arabia and what we do to introduce them to the private sector more.
Thank you very much, Brown. And there's also a lot of questions from people specifically about, I am an engineer of such, how do I turn into renewable energies? So I think that definitely, SASIA and SAWIA are like conducts for this kind of training and for this kind of exercises. But I mean, from what I know from South Africa and Spain and other markets, essentially you get working in renewable energy and you learn, right? I don't know whether anyone else would have anything extra to add there.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's impressed me is over the years since I founded SASIA, I get an incredible number of enthusiastic individuals from around the world, national Saudis, other countries that have made this a career move by getting a university degree, studying this, or have a passion for it afterwards. So there's a pent-up demand for this, and now that there is a program like this going on in Saudi Arabia, it's a wonderful opportunity to start to match these interests with opportunities, because then quite often you have interests that don't match with opportunity, and that's very frustrating for people. But it's going to be up to the private sector to start to engage and bring people in and train them, because the Saudi market, like any market, like whether it's South Africa or elsewhere, it's for the South Africans or it's for the Saudis, and we need to help to build those markets. As international companies, you can certainly benefit from it as its growth. But long term, it's going to be about, again, as I say, it's from the inside out. That's the only way it's really going to be successfully built.
Okay, so we don't have a lot more time, so we're just going to take another 5 minutes of your time, and we're going to answer a couple of questions here. That is about the localization formula. So I guess, Ayman, this is for you. But obviously, feel free, guys. If you can add and you can change. Based on the localization formula, to what extent do you think international suppliers would be required to implement manufacturing plants in Saudi Arabia? And there's a follow-up question a little bit later on that it says about, how is this foreign investment going to be regulated? So the IPPP program, the PPPs, how are they going to be regulated? So I don't know whether anyone wants to add anything or clarify anything on top of what you've already said.
I can answer that question. For coming rounds, there is for sure opportunity for local manufacturing because it will take longer time for payback, and the first round is already ongoing. But there are capabilities locally. I have done by myself, feasibility studies of local manufacturing in Saudi Arabia. So I do believe that there is many things to manufacture. There are requirements, minimum already there. But then, as Chris has been specifying, maybe for coming round there will be bankable issues, and this has to be already clarified. But in terms of feasibility, yes, there will be a chance to manufacture locally.
Okay, if no one else, would anyone else would like to add anything there? Okay, I have a question actually for Chris. There is a question here regarding local financing in Saudi Arabia. To what extent is that available? Obviously, I understand this is brand new, so it's going to take some time for the banks to sort of catch up, understand the technology, see what they have to look at. I just hoped that you could tell us a little bit about how it went on in South Africa, because it's one of the key, factors going forward. So how has it happened in South Africa? How long did it take? Did the local banks require anything specific? How can developers help that financing process along with local banks?
Mm-hmm. The PPAs in South Africa were all signed in the local currency, in Rand. So most of the financing was then absorbed by the local banks, who provided the debt financing for some of those projects. Some development finance institutions also participated and provided some debt in South African Rand. And then there was also a third category for some of the projects that used corporate finance for those projects. So I think, I'm not sure with what Saudi Arabia is planning to do in terms of if it'll be in local currency or dollar-based.
But it takes a while, right? That's kind of the catch-up.
One comment I would make, I think there's a healthy appetite for this area of activity in the renewable energy space. I think with the bit of the downturn in the traditional construction market, which banks have been very active in Saudi, and there's plenty of very substantial, well-qualified banks that have done a lot of different projects that there is a healthy appetite for this. I think there's, in this early stage, there's probably a lot of collaboration going to go on between international banks and maybe some local banks to get a clear understanding. But I don't think this is an issue of lack of capital or interest. I think there's money that is looking to be put into good investments. I think the key for Saudi Arabia is just understanding the business of solar. I think that in general, you could say it's about the world. You know, Saudi Arabia, the solar industry and wind industry is not about really technology anymore. There's incremental advances occurring in technology every day, but it's really evolved into a financial asset class. So it's a business commercial thing now. And I think in Saudi Arabia, we'll have to come up with its own unique model. And it's evolving now, both for this, there's this tendering business, and there's going to be the traditional kind of developer model that will evolve as the regulations come in place. But I think one thing that is in place already in Saudi is a very healthy, financial system there. Bankers and people are willing to invest in projects. And if the model, if it does take off, I think it will be a catalyst for the entire region to kind of grow, to be a multiplier.
Okay, and as we have run out of time, I'd like to ask the audience the last question. And just after that, Browning, I'll give you back again the mic so that you can, sort of do the final conclusions. But this is a question follow on the fact that SASIA and SAWIA are going to be holding more events, more webinars. So what is your biggest challenge? If you have a message for SASIA, for SAWIA, how can they help? How can people help getting you into the market and facilitating your entry? Is the issue that you cannot meet the right people? Is that your challenge? Is technology your challenge? Do you need to learn more about technology? Is partnerships your challenge? Are they particularly tricky for you? Is it understanding the legal issues, the framework, the context? Is it the fact that you lack information or knowledge that you require some help with your with certain specific business intelligence, or is it a different factor that perhaps we haven't mentioned here? I'll encourage everybody to vote. What is the biggest issue that you're facing at the moment for this specific market? I will give you 5 more seconds. Just get on the last votes. It's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and this will allow us to prepare information for you going forward. And this is it, so that you guys know.
Well,
Browning?
I would say this is good news in the sense of meeting the right people, and that's what effectively an association should do, is provide that networking and engagement platform. So that's a critical role that we hope to play, and this is a first step towards this. And the combination of what technology provides us to link people from around the world very easily, as well as having face-to-face events, which we'll have in the future. But I'd like to I'd like to thank first to all of our Belen and ATA Insights and Araceli, who in the background were kind of making this all happen and put it together. So I want to thank them for their hard efforts, and also our sponsor, Solar Expo, World Future Energy Summit, Reed Exhibitions. And more importantly, without these great speakers, and we have a real brain trust here of people, that you had a wonderful opportunity to bring this group of people, Ayman, Mehdi, Chris, Christoph. I want to thank you very much. I didn't know quite what to expect, but I think we had a very well-rounded webinar with lots of interesting insights. We will publish this, make it available to people. As Belen said, we will continue the discussion offline in other areas, but I welcome you to stay tuned for other events and activities that we will have, and perhaps you will meet some of these speakers in person one of these days, be it in Saudi or wherever. We'll certainly keep this message going forward, and I thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, guys. See you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Take care. Bye.